Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Ernest C. Mercier Lecture in Entrepreneurial Science. My name is John Moores. I'm the Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Studies here at the Lassonde School of Engineering, and I'll be your Master of Ceremonies this evening. Before we get started, I'd like to share York University's land acknowledgement. As this meeting is virtual and we're not all gathered together in the same space, I recognize that this land acknowledgement might not be for the territory that you are currently on. We ask that if this is the case, you take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory you are on and the current treaty holders. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Tekaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and to care for the Great Lakes region. I'm delighted that you could join us today for the 2022 Ernest C. Mercier Lecture in Entrepreneurial Science. First, I would like to extend a special welcome to Eileen Mercier. This lecture provides our students and community with an incredible opportunity to learn from renowned entrepreneurs and scientists who have leveraged their education to succeed in interdisciplinary enterprises throughout their careers. And this lecture and opportunity would not be possible without the support of Eileen Mercier. Thank you so much, Eileen, for your continued support in inspiring the next generation of engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs. And Dan Tzotzis. Lassonde is thrilled to welcome Dan Tzotzis, the co-founder of Awake Chocolate, as our keynote speaker for this year's Mercier Lecture. We're honored to have such a successful entrepreneur join us and to share knowledge and insights with our community of creators. At Lassonde, we are empowering creative thinkers and entrepreneurs to gain the depth and breadth of skills required to create a more sustainable world for all. As we continue to develop a community of passionate creators who are not afraid to take risks and employ an interdisciplinary approach, we pride ourselves on fostering opportunities for development through a variety of learning models and unique learning opportunities like this one. This lecture is just one of the very many ways that we are supporting and welcoming culture in which innovation can thrive. Through our Bergeron Entrepreneurs in Science and Technology program, or BEST as we call it, we are leading notable new technology entrepreneurship and knowledge mobilization initiatives. Our goal is to empower scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs who contribute critical knowledge, leadership to society, and make positive change. It will take all of us to create a more just and sustainable world and our success. That's why Lassonde is thrilled to partner with the Schulich School of Business to present this annual event. And I know today's lecture will inspire our students and community of creators to pursue their own entrepreneurial paths and create local and global impact. I would now like to invite Eileen Mercier to share welcoming remarks.
Welcome, everyone. It's been nearly 20 years since I established this lecture in memory of my late husband, Ernest, who was a chemical engineer and a businessman. He believed very deeply in the fact that these two disciplines needed to work together for the betterment of Canada. And when he passed away, I decided that the very best way to honor the memory of what he believed in was to have this lecture on an annual basis, sponsored by the two faculties at York that really embody the principles that he would have wanted to make public by this lecture. So I'm very, very pleased to be here. I wish I were there in person because it's a lot more fun that way. We always had lots of good snacks and a great speech and lots of chat. And I miss the students very much. I wish that I could be there, but it's just not possible yet. We certainly hope that the next time we give this lecture, we will be able to have an in-person event. But I'm very pleased that Dan has agreed to make the speech tonight, and I know we're all going to enjoy it. So thank you all very much for being here and supporting the principle of business and engineering together, making Canada better.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Our next speaker is Detlev Zwick, Dean of the Schulich School of Business.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. Well, let me begin by saying how grateful we are to Eileen Mercier for making this one-of-a-kind lecture series possible 20 years ago, as she just explained. Through Eileen's foresight, generosity, the Ernest C. Mercier Lecture in Entrepreneurial Sciences provides a really unique platform to showcase wonderful entrepreneurs who span this world of science and commerce. Eileen is not only one of our school's most successful and highly accomplished graduates, she's also a valued and long-standing member of the Dean's Advisory Council at Schulich. So on behalf of the entire Schulich community, thank you, Eileen, for your generous support and commitment over many, many years. Schulich is excited to be associated with the Mercier Lecture because it shines a spotlight on innovation and of course, the successful commercialization of new technologies and products. Innovation and entrepreneurship are increasingly important to our students at Schulich. We see this trend across all of our programs. It's the main reason why we created a new Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship a year and a half ago. It's under the direction of Chris Carter, and the office helps drive entrepreneurship to the forefront by providing Schulich students with the entrepreneurial skills and the networks they need to build businesses of their own. One of the ways it does this is through events like BEST and the Schulich Startup Night competitions, where entrepreneurs from Schulich and Lassonde get a chance to pitch their business startups to a panel of industry judges. These sort of experiential, real-world pathways for students to become successful entrepreneurs, just like tonight's keynote speaker, Dan Tzotzis. Dan is a doubly proud Schulich graduate, BBA class of 2002 and MBA class of 2010. And as of last year, I'm very excited to announce or tell everyone in our school's entrepreneurial studies program. Fantastic. Dan's story is the classic entrepreneurial story of an overnight success that took years in the making. It's truly a story of perseverance, persistence, sometimes against great odds. I already heard some of those challenges he had to overcome. I think we'll hear a lot more about this tonight. It's a story that started in Dan's kitchen, cooking up the right chocolate formulation, to getting a deal done on Dragon's Den, securing a shelf space at some of the biggest retailers in North America. And from all I can tell, it has been a thrill ride, which is the title also of his talk tonight. So Dan, all of us here at Schulich, we are very proud of you. We are proud of what you have accomplished. Most of all, proud of the way you are giving back to Schulich and to help develop the next generation of Canadian entrepreneurs. And now we are really excited to hear about some of the hard-won lessons you've learned along the way, and we're very thankful that tonight's Mercier Lecture made that possible. Thank you very much, and I think back to Paul.
All right, thank you very much, Dean Zwick. So please next join me in welcoming Andrew Maxwell, the Bergeron Chair in Technology Entrepreneurship here at Lassonde, who will introduce our keynote speaker. Andrew will also be acting as the moderator for the question and answer session that will follow the lecture.
Thank you so much, John, and it's great to have everyone here today. And it's great to be the host for this session with Dan. I'm just realizing that the first common link between Dan and myself was actually Dragon's Den. If people don't know, my PhD was done while I was helping on the first 4 seasons of Dragon's Den. I think Dan was in season 7 or 9, but anyway, but there's quite a few Schulich people that I met even during the first 4 seasons. So welcome, and kind of one very general comment is that one of the things I've always found about entrepreneurship is the importance of role models, the importance of learning from people that have been there, the importance of recognizing that they did it so that you can do it. And by the way, that doesn't always mean success. It can mean failure too. So before introducing Dan and asking him to talk formally, I would like to do a poll, if we're ready for that poll. And I think the poll is, are you thinking about launching a startup? So simple, yes, no, maybe, whatever the answer. If you could just take a minute and tick the box. It's not too difficult. There's no grading for this, but might be chocolate, I guess. So are you thinking about launching a startup? Or maybe your second startup, or perhaps even your third startup, because by the way, statistically, most likely to succeed is your third one. So get through the first 2 quickly. 48%, 22% say no, and 30% say maybe. But the big challenge like this, if you've ever been involved in any of the Oxford debates, which we actually used to do as Lassonde debates here at Lassonde, we're going to ask the similar question at the end and see if anybody has changed their opinion based on Dan sharing his experiences of the journeys of a Canadian entrepreneur. So without further ado, Dan, welcome to the Mercier Lecture this year. And we're delighted to have you virtually. And of course, as I already mentioned to you, we're going to invite you to come back in person and do one of our Mercier seminars when everyone's back on campus.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. I am humbled to be here today.
And just before you start, if people have questions, please post them in the chat, and then I'll try and come to them at the end to ask Dan. So thank you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you once again, Andrew. Thank you, Detlef, John, Eileen, and everyone involved in putting this together. I am humbled to be here tonight to share my story, to share the journey that I've been on with Awake for the past decade now. Can't believe it's been a decade. And to give everyone a little bit of a glimpse into what the Entrepreneurial Thrillride is all about. Some lessons that I've learned through the school of hard knock, as I call it, in starting Awake from just a mere idea and turning it into a multi-country, multi-SKU, and multifaceted chocolate enterprise. So thank you again. The agenda today will follow basically 4 things. I am going to share who I am and why anyone would care. I will take you through the Awake chocolate story, share a little bit of the science behind Awake. And if those are brave enough to stick around for that part, I will share the caramel secret with everyone on this call. Because we do have a caramel filled item, I've had the opportunity to learn exactly how that's made, and I will share that with you. I feel like I'm bracing for a big climax with that one, but believe me when I say that it isn't all it's cracked up to be. And then I will share 10 years of lessons, some things that I've learned along the way, and hopefully some takeaways that each of you can, that will resonate with each of you as you kind of brace for the next chapter of your life, which may or may not necessarily involve an entrepreneurial venture. So I'm Dan Tzotzis, and this picture is actually, I've become one of the poster children of the Schulich School of Business as a graduate myself. As Detlef mentioned, I am a graduate of Schulich's BBA program in 2002, and then the MBA program in 2010. I am also now an instructor of entrepreneurship and new venture creation at the Schulich School of Business, and I love every aspect of Schulich. Clearly, I spent my entire education, my entire business education there, and love the values that it stands for, and obviously gave me the opportunity to learn beyond my corporate role, to gain some additional skills in helping me become the entrepreneur that I have been today. So as far as I go, obviously I come with an education at Schulich. I am a lifetime career guy in consumer packaged goods. For those that haven't had the opportunity to kind of see my background pre-Awake, I started my career, got recruited directly from the Schulich Career Center, and started with Kraft Foods in 2002 in the field of finance, pursuing what I was majoring in, which was finance and marketing at Schulich in my undergrad. I spent 4 years with them in a multitude of different roles that involved innovation finance, corporate finance, brand finance, so on and so forth. My claim to fame there at the ripe age of 24 was that I got to sit on and be a part of the global launch of Tassimo home brewing systems, and was the Canadian finance lead for that launch, sitting with a global group of Kraft employees to bring that to life in multiple countries all at the same time. Was awesome to be a part of. Then transitioned into a role at PepsiCo, started on the Quaker business in the customer finance role, and then eventually transitioned to become a sales guy with PepsiCo. Starting in a vendor advisory or category management capacity with Loblaw Foods, advising them on how to structure their shelves and the four Ps involved in their oatmeal and I guess puffed snacks segment, or healthy snacks segment. Then took on a number of different regional and national account management roles, managing the $150 million Quaker business with Loblaws. And then transitioned to the Frito-Lay side of the business, where I acted as the conduit between marketing and sales, helping operationalize brand plans and creating them in such a way that I didn't end up upsetting any of the retailers in doing so. So for everything that you saw on shelf for Frito-Lay in the period of 2010 and 2011, in terms of pricing, in terms of the way it was merchandised, in terms of the way it was promoted and displayed, all of that went through my desk. So I am intimately familiar with the chip category, also an intimate consumer of it, but that is my background. And I won't bother sharing the video at that point. It's too complicated to figure out technology behind it. But it was right around that time in 2010 where I happened to be out for a random burrito lunch with my now two partners, Adam Deramo and Matt Schnarr. And realized that at that burrito lunch, we all had that entrepreneurial itch. We all wanted to start our own businesses. All of us came at it from a different perspective, but we all wanted to be a part of something that we created from scratch. And it was at a random burrito restaurant in Mississauga, Ontario, which you see El Sombrero on the side there, that our business was hatched. And I mean that in the most literal term. We, on the back of a napkin, formed a partnership, had no idea what we wanted to do, but set our sights on trying to create something unique that we could successfully launch in the marketplace. At that point, we had no idea what we wanted to do. It was just a matter of getting together and forming a partnership. And then over the series of the next couple of months, we spent evenings and weekends really trying to figure out what it is that we could do. And we realized that all of us had lifetime, we were all lifers in consumer packaged goods. And that's where we knew we could add a lot of value. So while we didn't know exactly what we wanted to do at that point, we decided that we were going to stick within our realm and what we knew well, which was consumer goods. Through a series of different evenings and weekends and brainstorming of different ideas, what we ended up ultimately recognizing was that chocolate presented a unique opportunity. It was a mega category that really hadn't changed much in the way of innovation. There wasn't anything that had launched other than you seeing the right sizing, upsizing, king sizing, club sizing, bite sizing of the same chocolate brands that have been around for 100 years. No one had really delved into the realm of creating something functional within that space. And what we had seen firsthand working in consumer goods was that there were products with functional benefits popping up everywhere and creating multi-billion-dollar segments within large categories. Look no further than energy drinks and carbonated soft drinks. Red Bull launched and helped create a $10 billion subsegment within carbonated soft drinks and reinvigorated a growth in an otherwise stagnant category. You had probiotics in yogurt, vitamin fortified waters, fiber and omega and granola bars, you name it, every major category had seen it with the exception of chocolate. And what we endeavored to find was a way to bring function to chocolate without sacrificing the one thing that people wanted their chocolate to do, which was taste good. Now that's where the trick and the science came in. There was, once you add a functional ingredient like protein or like caffeine, it leaves something to be desired in the taste column. And while there might be curiosity to give that product a try, what you would often find was that if you weren't nailing the taste, people would try it once, but if it tasted bad, never try it again. And what we then did was say, okay, well, we knew caffeine was something that you could feel. It was a function that people could feel. When you drink a coffee, you're energized by having caffeine. And what we endeavored to do was try and find a way to mask the taste of caffeine and then infuse it into the chocolate. No, that is not my partner on the left-hand side of the page. It is a friend of ours. It's a father of our friend of ours who we found out built and sold chocolate manufacturing facilities. And in the background is my Stony Creek kitchen at the time where my wife and I were living, where we baked Awake's first chocolate. Now, in doing so, the expert that is on the left-hand side of the page helped Adam, myself, and Matt create the formula and temper the chocolate on a small scale. And you can see that he's holding peanut butter because we tried a number of different flavors. But the trick came in infusing the caffeine. So caffeine in its rawest form is a bitter and heinous tasting ingredient. It ruins anything it touches. In fact, it's about that much caffeine, which is 50 to 100 milligrams that you'll find in your average cup of coffee. And it's just that amount of caffeine that ultimately makes your coffee bitter. Well, that's no easy a task when working with chocolate. And what we did was, obviously not being scientists ourselves, endeavored to find people that could help us create or mask the taste of chocolate or caffeine. And we did. So we procured raw caffeine, we procured masked caffeine, and then we started tempering chocolate and infusing it right on my stove on that cold day on February 12th of 2011. And what we realized was that using the masked caffeine and infusing our chocolate with it, we had something special. We were successfully able to mask the taste of caffeine and infuse it into the chocolate, get the same great taste, and get the pick-me-up of caffeine that consumers were looking for. In fact, when we added the raw caffeine to it, it completely ruined the taste. You couldn't actually, you couldn't even swallow it. It was that bad. So we knew we had something special. We then spent the next 15 or so months building a business plan, farming this idea out to investors, and engaging in over 100 investor calls over the series of several months. That process in and of itself, before we even sold a bar of Awake, was a trying and difficult process. Forget the fact that we solved how to actually infuse caffeine in without sacrificing the taste of chocolate. That seemed like one of the hardest things to do. It wasn't. Finding the investors to help kind of bring our business to life in a meaningful way without bankrupting our families personally and leaving our jobs was the hardest thing that we did. So once we expanded our network, we met with a series of different people, got a number of different investors on board. And as Andrew mentioned, went on Dragon's Den to try and convince them to come on board as well. We were successfully able to bring our business to life. And on July 1st of 2012, we all quit our jobs, took the dive in. And for context here, in entrepreneurship, it becomes an extension of your family. There is no separation of church and state or work and home life. You are enveloped in what you are doing on a daily basis, especially when starting things out. And why I say that is because I did want to share that same year, my wife and I decided to move into a bigger house, take on a bigger mortgage, and my wife was due with our first child in November of 2012. So I decided to buy a new house, start a new company, take the ultimate leap, and do so while having our first kid. And as I would come to find out in 2000, after my wife gave birth to our child, she was done working too. She wanted to go back and had aspirations of going up, but the moment she laid eyes on our child, she wasn't going back. So all the more pressure that was built on. You want to talk about Thrillride? Try doing those 3 things in the same year and then come back to me and tell me how fun that is. So needless to say, I came out of it with a smile on my face, and thankfully 10 years later, haven't had to beg for my job back at PepsiCo. And when you kind of look at what we've accomplished over the last decade, we started out as a one-trick pony, selling one solid milk chocolate bar variety in Canada only. And we started off, we secured 3,000 locations. The 3 employees were the 3 founders ourselves, and we did annual revenues of $300,000 in 2022. And mind you, this is 2 years after COVID hit, and we took a massive hit. Saw that roller coaster effect really come in over the last couple of years. We now have over 24 items and are about to add 7 more. We are available in 50,000 locations across North America that I'm proud to say are finally opening up again. We have 15 active employees and will generate about 10 million in revenues in 2022 alone. Again, we were hitting our stride. We had hit our inflection point right around that February of 2020 mark, and the world turned upside down for us, and we faced a thrill ride and roller coaster like no other business in over the past couple of years. And despite that, I am still standing here presenting to you and giving you a sense for what it's like to come out still standing on the other side. So that is Awake in about 10 minutes. As we kind of venture behind to the science behind Awake. Now I have a racy slide and it is with purpose. So a comical story that I often tell with folks was that same day in February of 2011, I had discovered what it was like to be flagged by Customs and Border Patrol. Whether or not anyone is aware of this, a little lesson on caffeine. In its rawest, purest form, it is a raw white anhydrous powder. Now, it wouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure out exactly what else is a white anhydrous powder. But as I'm sure you would come to be familiar with, when you're shipping kilograms of white anhydrous powder, needless to say, across the border, needless to say, it may ruffle a few feathers, especially when it's going to a residential house, a random residential house in Stony Creek, Ontario. That was me. We had boxes of this stuff. I had calls coming in from both US and Canada Customs and Border Patrol. And it didn't, after explaining to them what we were doing, I was able to kind of successfully get around it. But the reason behind this story wasn't because I was able to figure out how to extract caffeine naturally from plants and then figure out how to get that caffeine into chocolate. We had the help of scientists and food scientists that specialized in the very parts of this business. And through their support and their help, we're able to get us samples sent. And it is those relationships that we cultivated just to help us support that February 12th, I guess, invention day that we had at my house. And those relationships that we cultivated at that beginning that still remain relevant to this day. In fact, our caffeine supplier, who encapsulates the caffeine for us and then ships it to us after masking it for us, is the same supplier that we still use to this day. While the science of microencapsulation isn't a foreign or new concept, it's been around for decades. Finding the right supplier that can do this really well for us was like finding the needle in the haystack that we needed. The science behind it was really about the resourcefulness that we had in finding the people that could help us do it. We knew where to admit what we didn't know, and we had the help of others to bring that to life for us. So after we successfully overcame the procurement of this product and crossing borders with white anhydrous powder, we were off to the races. Now, we decided that we were going to create something where we had a lean operating model. What you see here is millions of dollars of equipment and the creation of Awake Bites that would help kind of give help kind of toll and mold our chocolate into what it is today, and then wrap it and box it and send it along the ways. We could have either spent millions of dollars really trying to understand and create and build the machinery and hire the labor to do this, but we decided to outsource it. And we have 4 facilities that operate right now. And chocolate in and of itself, in the form that we come, which is a molded or a deposited molded form, is a specialized manufacturing process. And whether or not we have a factory that only does Awake, or we use a contract manufacturing facility, we have become very familiar with it, and I have learned everything there is to know about chocolate. Really, the process works where you typically buy chocolate, the formula, or you create the formula that you need with the chocolate maker itself, who is the bean to the bean to chocolate producer. Once you have that, you ship those in liquid chocolate tankers to facilities like the ones we have in Montreal and Sherbrooke. And what we then do is mold and toll the chocolate. In this case, you're seeing milk chocolate come off our lines. We do have a caramel filled chocolate. Now, the caramel secret, which I promised at the beginning of this presentation, is really just a marketing ploy. There is nothing really crazy about it. And your chance to become Willy Wonka is now by having understood this secret. We have not solved rocket science or world hunger by creating this caramel bar. All that we realized was that caramel melts at a different temperature than chocolate. And as a result, we were able to maintain the liquefied form of caramel to deposit into our molds. And really, to create a caramel bar, it's a $20,000 part that you need to add to your machine. If you've got a molding machine, you can create a caramel bar in chocolate just by adding a $20,000 part. No rocket science behind it. And unfortunately, I don't have any major story about how inspirational it is to create caramel, but we did figure out how to do it by being resourceful and relying on our partners to do so. So the science behind it really comes with the support of others. I confess that I didn't know anything about chocolate until we started up. I've become an expert on it, but it was through the help of others that helped kind of bring this to life. And yes, now we play an active role in how our brand looks, how our brand feels, and when and how it is produced. But to get there, we needed the help of experts. And having the humility to admit that was one of the big learnings that I had figured out right from the start as a key factor in delivering our company's success and allowing it to thrive over the last little bit. As far as lessons go on entrepreneurship, I've learned a lot. In fact, the last 10 years have been like 100 years of corporate life for me. Some have been good lessons, some have been hard taught. The main reason why I want to share this with you is that whatever I have picked up along the way, whatever mistakes I have made, if I can help even one person in forums like this, or in teaching at Schulich, or in mentoring others, in learning from the mistakes that I made so that they don't make it down the road, then I will have fulfilled my life's purpose. There's my wife, there's my children, and then there's giving back in ways that I can. And there's no better way that I know how than to teach people on the lessons and the mistakes that I've made so that they don't make them down the road. First lesson that I got was expect a long journey and then double the time. I will be honest with you and tell you that I won't beat around the bush. When I left my job at PepsiCo, people want to say it was to fulfill an entrepreneurial purpose. Yes, that was absolutely a part of it. But speaking from the capitalistic perspective, any for-profit company is doing it to turn their business into a profit-generating enterprise. And we were a profit-generating enterprise. And with zero sales to start, what I was effectively doing was trading income for equity in hopes that I was able to build up a business very quickly and then do so by turning it around and selling it to one of the big players. Well, I'm around 10 years later. I thought I would be able to successfully build my business up in 5 years, sell it to one of the big players like Hershey, and then sail off into the sunset on an island that I purchased with the proceeds of the sale from my business. Well, I'm 10 years into this and it still hasn't happened. So one of the lessons that I've learned is to expect a long journey, and then whatever the length of that journey is, just multiply it by 2. It takes a long time to build a business. And no matter what you convince yourself of, and no matter how much of an optimist you are, and I am a glass half full kind of guy, the world simply doesn't work at that speed. You might get lucky. There might be ways that you develop an overnight success story literally within a few years. But as Detlev mentioned in kind of his introduction, in his introduction of what he was for me, he was right. We were the overnight success story that took several years to build. Expect a long journey and double the time. And if after that you're still happy with the decision that you're making, after multiplying the time that you expect by 2, then it's something worth pursuing. I can tell you that even though it's taken double the time, and even though the business has been through a ringer, and I've seen personal ups and downs like I haven't, like no other point in my life in the last 10 years, I wouldn't trade this for any other experience, even for a second. Finding your lightning in a bottle often takes a few tries. Andrew mentioned it right from the start. In fact, one of the things that I live by happened to be said in my MBA class when I had one of my old instructors come and do a guest speaking session. And it was him that actually taught this to me during my Schulich MBA. Most often, a person's success, either in corporate or in the entrepreneurial world, is often defined by a few home runs, 1 or 2 home runs that they may hit. What often gets lost is the fact that it took multiple tries and multiple failures to get there. Chances are you are going to fail on your first try. In fact, I sit here before you today, and while the company's growth might be impressive, I feel like I've failed myself in ways on a daily basis. I feel like a fraud myself on a daily basis because I've taken so long to build this thing, and I thought I would be moving on with other things in this world. But as I find it, that these failures are often what makes you into the person that you are. And success is often achieved by those who don't know that failure is inevitable. And I realize that as I speak here before you today, expect to fail. The trick behind it is to learn from it and fail quickly. Awake has made multiple investments, and the lion's share of those investments have fallen completely flat. In fact, it's worked our way backwards at times. But we learn from them, and we rip the Band-Aid off quickly when we made it. Chances are you're not going to find your lightning in a bottle on that first go. Your hunch might lead you in the right direction, but it's usually some things that happen between the start of your business and that first year that you start to see where there really is a business to build. And that's exactly what happened to us. Accountability is next level for an entrepreneur. I've always said this. I've said this right from the first time that I was humbled with the opportunity to speak at these kinds of occasions. And I say that the CEO of large organizations carry the weight of the world on them. There might be hundreds, if not thousands of people that are relying on the decisions that they make and those decisions to be sound so that the folks that are working for them don't end up losing their jobs and in worst case scenarios, not being able to put food on the table. That's a lot of responsibility to bear, but they will bear it in their mansions, in their large homes, with their massive salaries. So from a personal standpoint, they won't go through the same thing that a startup entrepreneur will. I have stories, and I fortunately for me, I didn't have to experience this, and I planned my way around it to make sure that I had enough money to keep the lights on. But I have stories of friends of mine who started their companies who quite literally lived out of their own car for their first year. That was a risk that they were willing to make, and a risk that they were willing to tolerate. Not something that I would be willing to do, but there are all kinds of entrepreneurs out there. And there is no greater accountability that I see than that which an entrepreneur faces, especially at the onset of their business. This, if there's anything that you take away, this is the one that I want you to take away. Not necessarily that you now know what my entire family looks like, but the fact of prioritization. Everything that you see, everyone that you see on this page is who I get up for work, get up and go to work hard for. My parents, my sister, my brother, my 3 children, who are the 3 on the right. Furthest to the right is my oldest daughter, Zoe. My son, Elias, is the baseball player in the middle. And my son, Luca, is the one with the Blippy shirt on third from the right. My nephew, Leo, is the one on the left there. But these are the people that matter most to me. This is what I live for. In fact, what I see as most successful is that I have become closer to my family. I have not lost sight of that. If I were to lose my family as a result of my pursuit of financial success or the success of Awake, to me that, and I would lose my family or separate myself from them, that to me would be the hardest. That would be the hardest thing for me to grasp, and that would be a personal failure on my end. Remember what's important to you and keep them or that thing as a key priority, because being an entrepreneur can ultimately consume every ounce of your time. So remember what's most important to you and never take it for granted. For me, it's family. For you, it could be something very different. It could be faith. It could be a support system. It could be philanthropy. It could be anything. But just remember, make time for it, because the entrepreneurial world would suck you when there isn't enough hours in the day to get out what you need to. I say this to my MBA students, and I will say this to you. You are always selling in the entrepreneurial world. And often you are selling, you're selling things that you may not be convinced of yet either. As a person with pre-revenue sales, or as a company that's just starting out with pre-revenue sales, an entrepreneur has to do the impossible. They have to convince people that they themselves are going to grow something that they don't know actually will grow into the thing that it will be. That is a really tough thing to do. And after they convince a bunch of investors to get on board, or they convince a bunch of suppliers to get on board, or they convince their employees that this thing is going to grow into something special, just stick around that much longer. Or they convince their partners to go in a specific direction, no matter what or their wives or husbands or kids, that what they're doing is meaningful. You are always selling, no matter what you do, no matter what way the wind blows. As an entrepreneur, you have to remember that. You have to be on point. People, whether it's your employees, your partners, your suppliers, your customers, they're always relying on you, and you are always trying to sell them on what the future holds for your company. Remember that as you're going through. The formula for success, and I'm about to wrap up here, so I know that I'm kind of hitting the time, but the 3 formulas: knowledge, education, and experience is a very important play. Networking and persuasiveness, being resourceful, is the second component in the formula to a successful entrepreneur. So as you see it, obviously gaining the skill set and the know-how through education and experience is going to play a role. Having that constant need to learn, that constant need, the curiosity to figure things out, and the ability to find people to solve the gaps within your own flaws or within things that you don't know is a key component. But after, you could become a master of being resourceful, and you could be the smartest person on earth and have the best combination for that. But always remember that there is an element of luck, an element of being in the right place in the right time, or as my mom says, kismet, which really just comes down to fate, that plays a role in everything you do. And that knowing and remembering this formula for success brings me to my last point. Having the humility in everything you do will go a very long way in the world of entrepreneurship. Surround yourself with the right people, and realize, most importantly, realize your own worth. by having the humility to know what you, to admit what you don't know, and understanding that, and then surrounding yourself with the people that can help solve those gaps is going to make you not only a better person, but a better business professional, a better entrepreneur. But it starts with a very critical self-evaluation. And then from there, admitting that there are things that others can do better than you, and getting them on board to come along that entrepreneurial thrill ride with you. That is me and the lessons that I've learned in a nutshell. I hope that you've taken away a few components. I am always around to connect. And after this call, if anyone does want to, I will coordinate my contact information to share with you. Once again, I am humbled to be here. I thank everyone that coordinated this event for having me on here. I'm honored to have shared this stuff with you. And for those that had the time to listen today, thank you for listening to what I had to say. Appreciate everything. Once again, thank you. And I will turn it back to Andrew at this point.
So Dan, thank you so much. So you just caught me eating some nice chocolate that I somehow managed to get for today. So thank you for that. I just wanted to kind of go back to a couple of things. One was you shared an insight. I'm not sure people heard it. You said we sat around the table, we wanted to create something, and we realized that what we had was deep knowledge of the CPG business. And I think that's so important. That kind of goes back to your point about knowing who you are, what you are. There are so many times I see people who say we want to start a business, and they have no background, they don't know about it. It's just, here's an interesting idea. So that's a really important, we call it effectuation, understanding what you have access to. So, if you're sitting in a lab with the technology that you have access to, then that's effectuation. If you're sitting with people that you can work with. But the question I really wanted to ask you was, early on, you had to find scientists that you could work with, manufacturing people that you could work with, and I'm focusing on the difference between the business background, the technology background.
Yep.
How did you decide who to work with when, I'm not trying to be simplistic, but you didn't know whether they knew their science or whether they could manufacture? How did you decide that those are the people that you want? Because you obviously made a lot of good choices. How did you do that? Because I think there's a myth that entrepreneurs work by themselves and really they're a team.
Yeah, in fact, I share that with as many people as I can, Andrew, is that the notion of entrepreneurship is mainly about creating an ecosystem around you that can help create something special that you can commercialize appropriately. When we were I will tell you wholeheartedly that when we were a pre-revenue company, getting anyone on board was a challenge. And part of the process of selecting who we could was to do the research for every company or every supplier or every partner that we got on board. We spoke with a minimum of 10 to 15 other people. So I mentioned, we'll use caffeine as the example. There were a few microencapsulation organizations and food scientists that we work with, or that we reached out to at the beginning to help kind of procure the necessary caffeine or the functional ingredients that we needed. And we tested out a bunch of different varieties. I think the trick there is to recognize that, to find folks that you need, that solve a gap that you have in building your business or building a technology. The trick is to get as many lines in the water. It's selling 101. It's get as many lines in the water as you possibly can until you get that one bite that works. And the hope is that you get more than just that one bite to evaluate who can give you the best cost or who can give you the highest level of expertise at the lowest cost to you, whether it be in the form of equity, if it's someone that you want to bring on board as a partner from a technological standpoint, or whether it's a transactional partnership and you want you're going to be paying for their services in some other way. So The learning there is get as many lines figure out what you need, what you don't have in-house, and then get as many lines in the water to satisfy that gap. Find a few that are willing to kind of compare against one another. And the decision that you make then kind of speaks for itself by having two different parties essentially quoting for the same job.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I remember when one of my startups, we were supplying Loblaws, and we said, well, we're the best technologically to supply you. And the buyer that we spoke to said, well, I don't know anything about this, and I don't know anything about the technology. But by the time I've evaluated you and your competition, I'll know enough to make the right decision. And that was a kind of interesting perspective. So
that's the heart of it. That essentially is the heart of it, Andrew.
And you know, that comes down to building the trust. They ended up trusting us because what we said always happened, and the other people didn't always happen. And so I have no idea whether our technology was better, but they trusted us. So you talk about lines, and you talked earlier about the importance of learning from failure. You also talked about that expectation of failure. So can you share a lesson that maybe, you know, something that failed and what you learned from it, and an example of something that we could, you know, extend? Because I think it's really, you know, so much. You know, I always judge entrepreneurs teaching entrepreneurship classes by how much they include failure in their courses, and if they don't include it at all, probably it's not a good entrepreneurship class. So I'm sure when you have people that have real experiences, comes along a lot. So have you got like some examples?
I could speak endlessly about the number of failures and missteps that we've made. I would say I'll speak to the one that happened right at the beginning. So this was a failure that when I was working at PepsiCo, and I was 29 years old, I guess, when I was starting. No, I was 31 when I started exploring this. We had obviously invested some of our own money into kind of just getting the formation of Awake and procuring the necessary ingredients. And part of that was having a marketing services firm help develop a brand for us and what packaging could look like, and then a first production run of our first product. And I removed the slide that I've used in prior presentations on it, but Awake used to be a silver package with blue bold writing that had a power button that you would commonly see on your old cell phones or on electronics. That was the essence of what Awake was to be. So if you kind of think about the spectrum of Awake on taste versus function, this was heavily skewed toward function. Well, we had put nearly $100,000 collectively between the three partners of our own money into the development and creation and production of the film and the boxes and the chocolate that we ultimately wanted to commercialize. We might as well have taken that $100,000 and created a bonfire in one of our backyards, because if we proceeded forward with that prototype, we would have been dead in the water and I wouldn't be here before you today. It was such an epically wrong branding for what we were trying to create that had we not decided to move forward with the brand that we have today, with the owl that you see on my slides and that you can pretty much see behind you today and on my shirt, we would not have succeeded. And the reason why I can say that confidently is because we put the product into the market and it moved with a velocity of about 1/10 of what we did on our current branding. It took someone, an expert in CPG, one of our current investors today, to tell us in an investor meeting the day after we got the film that he loved the taste of our chocolate, but he thought that the branding was the worst thing that he had ever seen. That was a humbling experience. That was making me shrink from my current height to about that tall. And we had the humility to admit that we were wrong on the branding side. And he has commended us still to this day on that decision that we made. And the failure could have been a lot worse. We ended up failing fast. And I talked about that in one of my lessons. That was one of the examples that resonates with me. It just, we ended up making the wrong decision on branding, thankfully got out quickly, and were able to pivot even before the business had gotten into full distribution and save ourselves from absolute disaster.
It's a great example, and I'm just, as I hear you recount it, looking at it from the point of view of the investor, they were looking for the single most important ingredient in the entrepreneur, which is that they're coachable. They absolutely listen to feedback. They take it on board. Maybe not immediately. Maybe it takes 24 hours or 48 hours. They take it on board, and then the action, and then that becomes a joint plan. And as an investor, that's kind of the relationship you want to have. So that's a really, really important point.
Right.
I have a question from a couple of people in the audience, actually.
Sure.
I think related ones. Timmy and Ferkin were both interested in, the mindset, the perseverance, the ability to keep going, especially during COVID. There's setback, things were going in a certain direction. You kept saying a little bit impatient on speed, and then all of a sudden, kind of big roadblock. So how did you find that personal strength? How did the team find that strength to keep going? Because you certainly have not stood, sales may be down, but as a business, you haven't stood still during COVID. More brands, more investment, more other things. So
yeah, in fact, we had to double down. It's like when you were kicked to the ground, and our business was, I could say this with 100% truth. In the month of March of 2020, we were on pace to do a record period by about, 50%, our next best period in the 8 years that we were operating at that point. And we had a fantastic first half of the month. The sales that we did from the middle of March to the end of March, zero. I mean, like, you want to talk about a life-defining moment of seeing your business just crumble, and you have absolutely no control over where it goes. That to me is key. And it's those instances. It's not the ongoing dealings that an entrepreneur has to go through. It's not the 20-hour days that someone's got to work just to kind of make ends meet. It's the perseverance. It's how you react to the hardest circumstances, and how you react to the unthinkable, that really defines and separates the better entrepreneurs from the rest of the herd. And I say that because it's almost like you have to trick your mind into thinking that things are better than they actually are, and staying optimistic through it and just plugging your way through it. As an entrepreneur, you're only as good as your next investment. And what I found, Andrew, through this was that through COVID, as our business and our sales were depressed, the only way out of that mess was to double down on our investments. So we're seeing depressed sales, and we're having to bet the farm, not only to recover, but to pivot our business and recover in the right way and set up the infrastructure to support the new way of doing things virtually through e-commerce and everything else. And the mindset was just keep going, keep the end game in mind, and make sure that you understand where your priorities lie. For me, the part that that resonated with me, that kept me going, was my family, was my wife, my 3 children, the health. What I didn't share with the group was that in 2017, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and I was in the room with her when it happened. It was the single worst day of my life. And during COVID, the unthinkable happened. She is a literal walking miracle, but she was deemed cancer-free in July of 2020. That doesn't happen for stage 4 lung cancer patients. It never, it's a less than 1% chance of happening. And while I saw a lot of what my pride is based on is what I'm creating with Awake, but always keeping in mind the things that are important and finding the positives that come in your world. Business might not have been doing well at that point, but I had one of my single biggest fans, my life, my mom, given that kind of news. That's the stuff that propelled me forward.
Whoa, thank you. Very meaningful, and very fortunate. Stage 4 doesn't happen that much that they come back. So
Blessed, Andrew.
yeah, absolutely. And we need to count those blessings, right? Whenever they happen to us, we need to count them and recognize the importance of them. So I have a couple more questions from people, but I wanted to ask you about was, we talk about doubling down during the recession. So I know you got some investment in October
Yep.
from the UK. Not sure why the UK, except they like chocolate in the UK. Just tell us about that and how you persuaded them in the middle of COVID to invest, and what you think they saw about whatever you can reveal in public, what they saw about the growth opportunities, because they don't come in because it's like business as usual. They come in because they see the next stage of growth. So can you describe a little bit about that?
Yep, I absolutely can. And part of that was triggered by the fact that we knew we had to invest in our future. So we were only as good as our next investment, and that was going to require outside funding because of the environment with which we were playing in. So this venture capital firm that we worked with out of the UK was introduced to us by one of our lenders. They were in the market for functional products. They believe that the next major growth initiative in consumer goods is products with functional benefits. They've seen it happen in times past, but they believe that there is a play there. And they saw us as a logical fit. We had some sales to work with. Obviously, what they did was, it was almost like an onboarding, or let's call it a speed dating process that spanned over a 6-week period. And they, for lack of a better way of putting it, sent us through a bunch of workshops, interviewed with the key principals at this venture capital firm. And then what they said was that worst case scenario, we've gotten to know a company and we can keep you in mind down the road. Best case scenario, you've collected some information and we make an investment in you. We happen to be one of the 3 companies that, of those 20, that they decided to move forward with, mainly because of what we had created in the past and the prospects for what we were going to create in the future. So as far as getting them on board, it was our network that helped us. It was that resourcefulness that we've developed over the years to help us kind of put us in front of the right people. But it was our foresight to understand where our business was headed and how we were going to pivot through this storm to help get us through it. And that's what got them excited. And to this day, they keep telling us that we're one of their favorite companies. So I guess we've done something right with them.
I'm going to say it's easier when you make chocolate than most other things, but I'm not surprised either that you're one of their favorite companies. A couple of other questions. So Alan wanted to know about building the team. So I guess he's figuring with his startup that he doesn't have track record or domain expertise that he can point to, which may be a problem for his business, but certainly is going to be more of an issue for investors. Have you got some suggestions about what to do about that?
Much of that revolves. So I guess there's 2 components to that. One is knowing what you're looking for. That's often half the battle. What's really tough to do when you're kind of building your business, you're hiring employees not to fill a need now, it's to kind of grow into something in the future, or for what you want to do down the road. You're investing in that person to help solve a problem that your business currently has. Understanding that and planning for in advance is a very, very big step. Then it comes down to selection, screening, and hiring. I will tell you that it's such a hokey saying, but you have to slay a few dragons to get to the princess. I will tell you that is something that we have experienced firsthand. I talked about our failure, like the epic failure that we made at the beginning, but I can tell you that I have made 5 times the number of hiring mistakes than I have gotten them right. And the hard part about it is there's the human element that's there. We have started to use agencies that work on the cheap or on a percentage basis to help us with the screening element of it. but I would never recommend moving forward with any of those agencies until you know exactly what it is you're looking for. So what the entrepreneur can do is plan out exactly what they want their organization to look like, how they see it coming to life, and then creating resources around areas or gaps that the business currently exists. The simplified form of that is an org chart. And it could be an org chart of 2 people or 3 people, but as long as you know exactly how the functions and the business tasks are going to be split, you can start making decisions on how to hire. Then, unless they have a master's in human resources or organizational behavior, seek outside help, because it will be a mistake that you will make perpetually unless you get some outside help to figure that out.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, it does have impact on your business if you don't have that skill set in. You know, if you hadn't had the CPG background, it would have been very detrimental for your business. But that deficiency is accentuated when you're pitching to investors because they see it.
Oh,
So if
yeah.
your org chart says we're going to hire someone with this experience, that's great. I mean, I know that one of the pieces of advice I've got is find an investor or an advisor, someone who go on your board of advisors that has that experience to kind of fill the
Yeah.
gaps, because it's really important to understand where your gaps are.
One thing I do want to add that you just triggered a thought with, Andrew, that I have heard time and time again from investors, from advisors, from everything. I've kind of given you the perspective on how on what's needed, but the concept of hiring slowly and firing quickly is very real. Most often, if you have any level of empathy whatsoever, you will your guilt for hiring and then firing someone and playing and toying with them is it is real. But you have to remember that this business exists because of what you created, and making sure that if something's not working out, having candid conversations, dealing with things tough but fairly, people will understand that, and making those, don't extend something that isn't working. Spend 12 weeks figuring it out, and if it's not working in the way that you need it to, move on.
So I'm going to ask the final question, just because we're out of time, and I do appreciate your insights. And I think you've already answered it in part, but you know, 10 years experience, looking back, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you started? Apart from the fact it's going to take 2 times as long, because by the way, in my world of tech, it takes 3.142 times as long, which people know. The rule of pi. The rule of pi.
Rule of pi.
Costs 3.142 times as much as you think it's going to take, and takes 3.142. So I think that's tech versus consumer goods. But
well, you stole my answer, because that's the one that I give, is that it comes out of the length of time. That was my biggest learning. The other aha that I have seen is that success begets itself, as does failure. And the trick behind that is, no matter what you do, always recognize that you have to be selling and on your game every chance that you get. And what I have found is that even if you can't seal a deal with the individual that you're meeting with, or the organization that you're pitching to, or the employee that you're trying to talk to, leaving with constructive feedback on how to continuously improve is that much more important in the entrepreneurial world than I've ever found in the corporate world. So
that's a fantastic insight, Dan. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for your insights today. As I said, we're going to try and persuade you to come back. Eileen was very kind to extend the Mercier Lecture, which is annual, to the seminar series, where we are definitely entrepreneurial in the sense we find people that are going to be coming on campus or near campus anyway, and persuade them to come on campus and chat with our students over some food. So it'll be great to do that when we're back in person. So thank you so much for your time today. I am going to finish my part of this by doing another poll, and people kind of guess what the poll is. But the question is, after the lecture today, are you more inspired to launch a startup? So if you're already inspired, you should put yes. If you weren't inspired before, you said maybe before, then maybe it's still maybe it's no. But it would be great if you could answer this question as we finish the event today. By the way, Dan, when I was trying to get entrepreneurship into the engineering curriculum when I was at Temple University, I had this big argument with someone. They said, well, come and see if you could persuade the students. So I went into the 1.5-hour class on entrepreneurship, and I did this poll at the start, and it was 22% said they were interested in starting a venture. By the end, it was 48%.
Wow.
And it was like, and they turned around and said, okay, we have to start putting entrepreneurship in the courses. So it was interesting that, and that goes back to role models. It's not, I wasn't me particularly, but it's people being honest, sharing the journey, how exciting it is. It takes your own destiny.
Sure.
So Artem, do we have a result for the poll? Whoa, you see, it works. 80% said yes now. 7% said no, and only 13% maybe. That's a big switch. So,
I was terrified about this, to be honest with you. So I'm glad that it worked out exactly as you expected it to.
It's telling the truth, being honest, being, straight up with people, the challenges, go in with expectations, be good to people, think about your family. Lots of wonderful lessons that you've shared with us today. So I'm going to end my part of the session today. Thank you very much again for joining us. And going back to, I think, to John.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. All right, and I'd also like to thank everybody here today for joining us for this excellent conversation about innovation and entrepreneurship. I'd like to once again thank Dan for joining us and sharing his insights. And I think I speak on behalf of everyone when I say how interesting it was to learn about your entrepreneurial journey to success. If this talk worked up an appetite for chocolate, I'd like to remind student attendees that Dan has graciously provided some chocolate samples just for you. If you're interested in trying a sample of Awake chocolate, please stop by the Lassonde Dean's office located at 204 Bergeron Center to pick up your very own sample. The samples will be available early next week. Finally, I'd like to extend my thanks to the Schulich School of Business for their continued partnership on this event, and to Eileen Mercier, without whom this event could not take place. With that, thank you to everyone for attending, and enjoy the rest of your evening.